Miami Dolphins have some decisions to make this offseason. Looking at the roster we have at hand, it's a very talented roster. And first and foremost, or not first and foremost, before I get into it, this is not going to be a scouting video. I'm not going to be looking at potential targets. This is just going to be pointing the finger at holes that we need to fill for the Miami Dolphins going into the offseason. So the biggest hole, arguably, has been filled. And I'm going to be talking about that a little later in this recording session. And you'll see this video out on Friday. Getting Vic Fangio finally crossed the line. It was a lot more strenuous and tedious than it needed to be, but it really didn't bother me that he wasn't officially signed, because you look at last year with Mike McDaniel, and pretty much the same situation happened, except McDaniel had to wait till after he was out. Meanwhile, Fangio is still dealing with stuff with the Eagles, but that's a video that we'll talk about and come out more tomorrow. So arguably biggest needs already been filled. Got the defense coordinator, got Fangio in. That's done and settled with. Now, what else does the Miami Dolphins need? And I got the depth chart up here. And obviously, one of the biggest things that affected the team last year was the offensive line. We're going to be sticking with Tua. You guys know my opinion on Tua. I think it's better to move off him. But now looking at the crop of people who are out there, I would have moved off him for Brady. Obviously, that's not happening now. So Tua is going to be the quarterback at the very least for next year, next season, next offseason. If we address it there, we address it there. It happens. But the offensive line, the ability to keep Tua upright and not concussed, was definitely a problem. When Teron Armstead would go out of the lineup, you saw what the offensive line looked like last season, where you had guys that I wish I could never say their names again. I'd never see them running out with player introductions. I would just standing there, especially when Armstead was missing time this year, and just shaking my head like, this is how to go out with, because Armstead and Connor Williams, outside of Connor Williams' ability to just snap the ball to anywhere except where Tua was every now and then, they were the only two bright spots on the offensive line. Robert Hunt, we definitely saw his ability drop, which is, I would have thought he would have looked better with better offensive linemen around him, with a better center next to him. Yeah, Teron Armstead's on the other side of the offensive line with Robert Hunt at right guard, but his playing dip there. Liam Eichenberg had a horrendous season, and then right tackle was just a rotating door. Brandon Shell, Greg Little, obviously Austin Jackson goes down. So if we don't address anything else all offseason long, I want to see like 3 offensive linemen brought in, and at the very least compete for the starting jobs. Go to the draft. I haven't done a lot of analysis on the draft so far, so I don't know if there's a lot of good offensive linemen or not. Let me know down below. If there's something in the draft that you feel very passionate about, let me know down below. Offensive linemen, if we address nothing else, offensive line, keeping Tua upright, helping in the run game, is easily the number one priority left to go in this offseason after getting Fangio. 2, and kind of coinciding with that, the running game. We've tried this running back by committee now for a few years. This year, Raheem Mostert and Chase Edmonds originally, that turned into Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson. It was all right. It could have been worse, but dear God, it could have been a lot better. The amount of games we had where we're running under 100 yards combined is unacceptable. The rushing attack that we had against the Houston Texans, which was a horrendous rushing defense. I believe they were 31st in the league at the time against the run. I think we had just over 50 yards rushing on the game, is unacceptable. Normally, I wouldn't be for drafting a running back with a high pick, but with a lot of the needs, let's be honest, with a lot of the needs filled, that isn't something I would mind doing with our second round pick. Obviously, we don't have our first round pick. With our second round pick, I wouldn't mind attacking the running back position in the draft. We've seen some very good running backs come off the board end of the first, beginning of the second in the last few years. DeAndre Swift, J.K. Dobbins, Breece Hall, Jonathan Taylor, in that early second round, late first round area. I'd be all for it. On the offensive side, tight end, because Gesicki, let's be real, Gesicki's going to walk. And this is not a position that I'd put a lot of money at, wouldn't throw a lot of money at, but Gesicki's going to walk, and you're not going to roll into next year with Durham Smythe as your tight end 1, with Adam Shaheen coming off IR, with Hunter Long and how little he's been producing over his few years here with the Miami Dolphins, couple years with the Miami Dolphins. Tight end, even if it's a guy like how the Chargers brought in Gerald Everett, a guy who's bounced team to team. I know he's retired now, like Jared Cook, who bounced around team for team. I'm not looking for your 5, 6, 7 year tight end. I'm looking at somebody who can get a job done on a relative cheap basis, bring him in and get the job done. Third wide receiver, probably Trent Sherfield. I definitely like to bring him back, but Cedric Wilson did absolutely nothing for us all year long. Sherfield ideally is your wide receiver 4. So if we could get a better wide receiver 3, Alan Lazard's out there, potentially bring him in. I would like to see that. Again, this is not a scouting video. So those are the needs on the offense. Obviously, offensive line, running back, tight end, G's. That's just about everything. Even though we did have one of the better offenses in the league. Defense, it's not what it appears to be. Obviously, our weakest point last year on defense was the secondary, but that was certainly more so due to injuries than the position groups themselves. You're going out there with Keon Cross and a guy who was never intended to play defensive snaps in the first place. He was supposed to strictly be a special teamer. Now he's guarding Stephon Diggs. Not ideal. When you have 3 corners in front of him go down, talking Nick Needham, Trill Will, and Byron Jones not even playing a single snap, not ideal. But assuming those guys come back healthy, and it's up in the air whether Byron Jones comes back to the team in general. So if Byron Jones does leave, then that does become a need. As of now, he's there. Nick Needham, hopefully we can re-sign him. Trill Will, I think he's a free agent. Hopefully re-sign them. So not even necessarily go find guys, but just bring them back in. Safety position, I like where we're at. Brandon Jones, Javon Holland was working really well. And obviously defensive line, there's a lot of money already invested, and then Christian Wilkins is going to get that extension eventually. So defensive line is settled. I'm content with that. Emmanuel Ogbah, I'd even probably let him walk. Then the middle linebacker group, dear God, can we get somebody that can play coverage, please? Landon Roberts, I like him. Jerome Baker, I like him. Duke Riley, Channing Tindall barely played the entire season. But yeah, nobody that can play coverage. They get to, we play zone coverage, they get to a spot and just stand there. There's no scanning. I think Jerome Baker has the stiffest neck in the league because he just stands there and just stares down the quarterback instead of peeking over his shoulder and saying, "Oh, Mark Andrews is right there. Let me go guard him." There's none of that. There's no scanning. There's no situational or not situation. It's just environmental awareness, I guess, is the best way of putting it. He's just not aware of their surroundings. So we need a coverage linebacker or 2 or even 3, arguably. But defense, it really just was the injuries that hit us all year long. So on the defensive side, decide what you want to do at corner, bring in some coverage linebackers. And then another big question mark is what do you do with Jason Sanders? Now, if you asked me this question a month and a half ago, I'd be like, can I help him pack his bags and get him to his next destination? Because dude was horrible. And then he had his two clutchest games, his 2 biggest games, and the most important games of the season. That being the 3 field goals he hit against the Jets. And even though it didn't amount to a win, he made all his field goals and all his extra points in the playoffs against Buffalo. So now what are we supposed to think about him? He underperformed all year long. And in the most important position of the year, he had his best games. Where does that leave me? I don't really know. I think bringing competition for him and see if we find somebody else better than him. But if we go into next year with him, I'll kind of view him how I view Tua this year, and we'll view Tua next year. He'll be on probation for me. I'll be looking at him like, okay, as long as you do good, I'm not going to say anything bad. But as soon as you start to fall off the train a little bit, then we start to take it off a little bit. So that was running it back, offensive line, running back, stopgap tight end, coverage linebacker, deciding what to do with the corners, and kicker are the biggest decisions that need to be made for the Miami Dolphins this offseason.